posted it under course content. So we're only really going to adjust the next couple of weeks. For this Sunday, right, which we already talked about on Monday, is you have the MindTap Chapter 19th interactive story due. And that was what was due last week while everybody was surviving Ice-Mageddon. And document analysis number 2 is also due this Sunday on the 28th at 11:59 p.m. And that is an essay format. Okay, so make sure that you read it in the essay format. Kennedy, did you have a question?
Yes, I emailed you the question as well, but I guess I can just say it now. The documents aren't like for the parts and document analysis, like you can't read them. They're not there anymore. There used to be a link under the document analysis tab, but now it's just the one that has what like a part stands for.
Okay, let me pull that up. Okay, so I'm sorry, that's not right. Assignments.
Yeah, I can't on my end that second thing, a parts worksheet assignment.
Uh,
I can't see that.
oh, all right, just a second. I will fix that.
Thank you.
So there we go. You should be able to see it now. Can you see this one though?
Yes,
Because this is
I see the document analysis too. I'm looking at the other one now. Yeah,
okay.
it's there.
So yeah, this one is for the assignment you already did. That's why you couldn't see it. But this one here, click on. So this has always been available. You just use that as a guide. If you click on the folder for document analysis 2, you get that's hidden as well. Okay, let
Yeah,
me.
it was the fact that the documents were hidden.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so it should all be available now. The documents are there. The guide again is there, and then this to view complete to submit is also there. Let me double check something real quick. Make sure I edited that. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the due date has been fixed. So everything should be available now on that for you. Okay. Let me real quick, just in case my other section. I'm sorry. That's what I want. Is okay. That's fine. Did you have another question, Kennedy? Okay, that's fine. Theirs works. Okay. So, Kiana?
I just wanted to say, I think the top hat things are still not automatically going into the system because Unit 3 has not popped up in the gradebook yet.
You mean in for MindTap?
Yeah, mine's app. I'm sorry.
And it's well the I'm sorry. Trying to figure out. Okay, so Unit 3 was one that was due before 19. And it did not it's not in your Blackboard gradebook or it's not in the MindTap gradebook.
It's not in the gradebook, the Blackboard gradebook.
Okay.
Yeah, it's popping up on MindTap, but it haven't popped up on Blackboard yet.
Okay. Have you personally had this problem before? Like, has all your MindTap stuff always been transferred over properly?
The last one we did, I forgot which chapter it was. The last one we did before Unit 3, that one, you said that one didn't win either. Automatically, you have to go in and do it.
Okay. Did you set up an account with Cengage using a different email, not your Tiger Mail?
No, I use my Tiger email.
Okay.
At first, I used my personal Gmail. I don't know how that happened, but then I changed it to my personal email. I mean, to my school account email. So it's my school account
Okay.
email now.
That probably caused a problem. I'm gonna check into yours specifically because it should be showing up. When I look at the grade book with everybody's names on it, the majority of them are in there. That column is filled in. So I will definitely go back and check, and if it isn't transferring over, like if you have a grade in MindTap but not in Blackboard, I'll just go ahead and transfer that grade in there for you. But it may be an account issue. Like it's not, for whatever reason, it's not connecting to and importing your grades when you submit them. It would be nice if you could get that fixed, like call Cengage Tech Support or email them, but it isn't going to harm you. It's just going to be annoying because you're just going to have to remind me every time and I have to go in and do it manually. So if you could get it fixed, that'd be great. If it is a bigger issue, like they want you to pay or they want you to do a bunch of stuff, don't worry about it. You and I can just make sure that it gets transferred over.
Okay.
But I would call them, or contact tech support and see if you can't get that issue resolved. And I will go in and look at Unit 3 for you and move
Okay.
that grade over. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. So, and again, I just posted this last night. I haven't gone into MindTap for the next couple of weeks. So chapter 19 is open as this says it should be, but it will also say that chapter 20 is due on Sunday, and it's not. I'm going to fix that tomorrow or tonight. So for the third is a Wednesday. So this is kind of different. We always do things on Sunday. So on the 3rd, which is Wednesday, next Wednesday, you'll have chapter 20 primary source activity due on MindTap. Excuse me. And also next week, you're going to have discussion 2, which will be due on Sunday, March 7th. And I will open up that discussion for you on the 3rd as well. And it'll function just the same as discussion 1, which I will be grading this week or this weekend. A little bit behind. The grades on Blackboard are all grade for this class. Okay, so on your grades on Blackboard, you should have columns that have the grades for the varying assignments. And then there's one column that should say like total grade, and it'll give you your point value, and then it'll give you a letter, how many point, like it'll give you your letter grade, right? So you have both of those, they're in the column. And you know what? I may not have changed that for y'all. Okay. Trying to get all this done. So if it doesn't say that yet, it will this afternoon. So it'll have your total grade. That's always there. But it may not say the letter grade. If it doesn't, I will make sure that happens this afternoon. So you have an idea of what your letter grade is right now. And that's a good question because they want progress reports this week. They wanted progress reports last week, but we were all closed up. So, but again, the progress reports are just going to say at risk or not at risk of failing. If you have an F, you're probably going to get a love note from TCLA. It says you're at risk of failing. But if you don't, you should be fine. Okay? So just kind of heads up, that's what's coming. And these progress reports are messed up, as you can imagine, because of the major storm we had last week. But again, at risk just means you need to really rededicate yourself and come back. It doesn't mean it's a guarantee that you're going to fail. Okay. And then your midterm is actually a paper. It's the Common Core paper, and it will be due on March 14th. And we will go over that quite a bit next week and the week after. Okay. And after March 15th, the syllabus will be accurate again. All the explanations and descriptions are still the same. They're also on the syllabus. The only thing that's really changed is the due dates. If you have any questions, you can always email me. I haven't checked emails yet today, so I've been in class pretty much all day. I will check those probably this evening, so I'm not ignoring you. Things are just a little crazy here and at home and everything else. But yeah, so these are the new due dates. Again, they're under course content on Blackboard, and I sent out an announcement saying, that I had posted it. So please, if you have any questions, let me know. Go ahead and close that up. Okay, and we pretty much covered all of chapter 19 on Monday. So we're going to roll into chapter 20. I'm sure we didn't cover everything of chapter 19, but chapter 20 is World War I, and it's going to take at least 3 solid class periods to cover. So that's why I kind of moved us into chapter 20 earlier than we normally would have. And what you see on your screen is a, hold on, get down, you big moose. Go on. Sorry, I have a dog that thinks he's a human. Okay, so moving into World War I, the American history textbooks obviously fail to really impress upon us the gravity of this conflict. And that's in large part due to the Americans' involvement was pretty limited, especially since we didn't actually put boots on the ground until the last year of the war. That doesn't mean we weren't involved before, but we were mainly a background role. We were the Walmart of the world, if you will. We were providing war munitions, arms, any kind of war surplus we could. We made quite a bit of money off of the first couple of years of war. But we were paying attention, and Woodrow Wilson definitely did not want to do war, but he saw the writing on the wall a lot sooner than probably some other people did and realized we were going to have to. But we remained neutral, at least on the face of it. We said we wanted to remain neutral. But what's some of the background that isn't really included in American history textbooks for World War I is kind of important, and it gives you kind of some context, like how this happened, right? And Queen Victoria is a English or British monarch, right? She, I'm sure you've heard of her. If not, you are now. She ruled for 60 years. She was just a very complex character, but she got the nickname the Grandmother of Europe. And the reason for that is because she had 9 children. And in the time period, I mean, she had a whole age named after her, the Victorian era, which was mostly the 19th century, 1800s, late 1700s, 1800s. Actually, no, she died in 1901. So she was not intended to be the monarch. She is the only surviving child of the 3rd son of the king. Right. So a lot of people died before she took over, and even her own father preceded her. So it was her uncle that was king, and when he died, she was the living heir. She was the closest living heir. So Queen Victoria becomes queen in a time period in which women are very secluded legally and not allowed a lot of. There's a huge pressure for her to marry quickly, but at first she kind of puts that off because she realizes, she will be giving up some of her power. But she falls in love with her cousin. Yeah, so nice little family closeness there. The British, oddly enough, really favor not marrying your cousin, but the laws of the land state that you must marry within your station. In other words, a prince or princess must marry another prince or princess. And seeing as how Europe's royal families, there were limited options, should we say. So that's why you get a lot of intermarriage. That, and for a long time, royals, in world history, a long time, hundreds of years, royals were stuck on this idea of keeping the bloodline pure, so you married within your own family. And as you can imagine, you teenagers out there, this caused a lot of problems with their children. For example, King Tut, famous Egyptian pharaoh, his parents were siblings, brother and sister, and he married his sister. But he had a lot of genetic problems. The Habsburgs in the 16th, 17th, 18th century usually intermarried quite a bit. And, you know, they would have uncles marrying nieces, so way too close genetically. In fact, Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, was a product of this, and he was, God, that guy. His bottom jaw was so big that he could hardly chew. His tongue was too big for his mouth. He didn't learn how to speak until the age of 4. He wasn't able to walk on his own until the age of 8. Right? So serious genetic problems in there. But back to Queen Victoria and her family tree. She marries her cousin once removed. So there's a little more space for them. But she marries her cousin Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. And they're both Hanoverians, they're both Germans. They go on to have 9 children. And pretty much the reason they stopped having children is because he died. They were in love with each other. They were a true love match, and they functioned as a partnership quite well. And the family tree that you see here is actually a genetic one about hemophilia. But I'm using it to show you, not only did they have 9 children, they married off all of their children to other princes and princesses of Europe. So the woman had something like 80 grandchildren by the time she died. Now, she lived a long time, but still, that is a lot. And again, she has 9 kids, so they go on to all have kids. And the royals like to have a lot of kids, so that insurance, your heir and the spare. Now, if you look here, you can see that, we'll start over here. Right, her oldest boy, this is Victoria, she was a girl. Edward the 7th is her oldest boy. He will marry Queen Mary. They have several children. George V is his oldest boy. He will marry, Edward the 7th marries Alexandra. George V marries Mary. George VI marries Elizabeth. And then you have the reigning monarch right here. Okay, so this is the English line. Alice goes on to have several children, and her children marry into the Russian royal family. Her daughter Irene marries into the German royal family. You have 2 sons here and 2 daughters. Females are around here, are circles, and men are squares. Leopold, one of their sons, gets married and is married into, I want to say, Coburg. Right, so this is more of the Prussian, German, Austro-Hungarian line. Then you have Victoria, who marries into Spanish royalty, and Beatrice, marries into Spanish royalty, and one of these princesses marries into the Portuguese royalty. So they pretty much cover it all, right? They have all of these siblings that are ruling, that are kings and queens, and leader czars and princesses and czarinas. Now, what this also dictates is the bloodline of hemophilia. So while she may have been the grandmother of Europe, she also spread hemophilia. Now, hemophilia is a blood disease. In other words, it means that your blood cannot clot. So whenever you cut yourself, you get a nick or whatever, you get a scab, right? And that's kind of heals over, and then it goes away. That scab is clotted blood, and when your blood cannot clot, you can bleed to death, with a simple cut. It's very dangerous, especially in the 18th and 19th century, right? And when you get a bruises are basically broken blood vessels underneath the skin. But if you have hemophilia, they just bleed and bleed and bleed. So you get these huge bruises. They swell. They get in your joints. It's very, very, very painful. And it was deadly in especially in the 18th century, 19th century as well. Hemophilia is located, or the defective gene is located on the X chromosome. Women do not typically seem to be affected because we have two X chromosomes. However, men have an X chromosome and a Y chromosome, and therefore, if they get a defective X chromosome, they will have hemophilia, which is why Queen Victoria did not have hemophilia, but she spread it to all of Europe, right? So affected male is solid purple, unaffected is the white box. Queen Victoria is a carrier. She has the defective gene, but she doesn't have hemophilia. So she passes it on. Luckily, right, her heir did not have it. But again, there's a 50-50 chance with every kid that they will have the defective gene. The girls are more safe than the men and the boys, but they can be carriers. So as you see, Alice was a carrier. Leopold had it, but managed to live. Beatrice was a carrier, but Beatrice spread it throughout Spanish royalty. Leopold spread it throughout the Austrian line. Alice spread it through the Russian royalty and German royalty. So as you can see, this hemophilia kind of outlines not only their reach diplomatically, but the reach of this genetic disorder. And that's actually going to play a really key role here in the Russians. But we'll get to that later. All right. Oh, that's why. No problem. It shows. All right. So let's talk about World War I. World War I started strangely. There are several causes to World War I. When they ask you what is the cause of World War I, most people look to the assassination of a man named Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He is the heir apparent to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, right? But he's just kind of like the icing on the cake, or his assassination, he and his wife. You have the origins of World War I are really made up of several things, right? Bosnia and Herzegovina has been occupied by the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1878. And again, this isn't in your, don't worry about this part, okay? These slides, you can copy them down if you want, but this is just background. This is just kind of setting the scene for you, okay? Austria-Hungary has been dominating Central Europe, as is the Germans, okay? And they take over this area of Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is largely composed of Bosnians, Serbs, and Czechs, right? Ferdinand, the Archduke, is actually in favor of greater Serbian autonomy. And these different groups are culturally very different from Austrians and Hungarians. They are actually much more closely related to Russians. And so they are having a problem. They're kind of chafing under the yoke of this imperialistic power that wants to come and impose things on them. Now, the Archduke is much more liberal with a small L, right? He is educated. He wants to do reforms. He wants to provide infrastructure. He wants to expand the arts throughout the empire. But again, he's the heir apparent. He is not the ruler of this empire. And his father is very, very conservative. And so he's trying to kind of lay down the law as far as, you know, an autocracy, and my word is the law, and you will do what I say, and you need to conform. So the Serbians form this extremist group called the Black Hand, or the terrorist wing, if you will, of the Serbian cause. And they plot to assassinate the heir apparent, right? And in this part of history, in the world history, it was very, very dangerous to be a political leader. I mean, look at America, right? We had the assassination of Garfield, we had the assassination of McKinley, Lincoln, right? So the assassinations were rampant. In Russia, they had several czars that were assassinated, and there were attempts on the life of Queen Victoria. There was like 6 attempts on her life. So pretty dangerous occupation. Lots of perks, but pretty dangerous occupation. And so the plan is set in motion to assassinate this man. But underneath all of that is this idea of competing nationalisms. And again, especially in South and Eastern Europe, where we're talking about the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Germans, Russia, and this idea of creating our own independent states that are of our own culture and our own nation, if you will. And there becomes this rivalry among empires. Could this be because they're all related? That could be it. That could be part of it, at least. But again, this whole family, this extended family of Queen Victoria, vacations together every summer. Mostly in Britain, but it could be in France. And you have all the heads of Europe are basically in one place. They don't do it, they don't publicize it because they don't want, assassins there. But they're very, they talk to each other on a regular basis. There's extensive writing back and forth letters, so we know that they talked. And everybody who's got a big family knows there's one cousin, right, who seems to have a chip on their shoulder, or one cousin that's hard to get along with. Well, in this family, it was Wilhelm, and Wilhelm becomes the Kaiser of Germany. Right? Some believed it was because he was born. He had a genetic, or he suffered some sort of injury in his when he was born, and so he had an arm that wasn't quite developed properly. So maybe he had small man complex. He had to overcompensate, if you will. But either way, they still got along with him. They still wrote to him. They still respected him. But there was this undercurrent that everybody knew that Willie was kind of crazy and arrogant and kind of overinflated, right? And we see that in their letters back and forth. So there's this rivalry among empires and diplomatic alliances, but they're inflexible. In other words, it's very black and white. Between, say, Russia and France, they are allied, and they say that, any act of aggression towards one is considered an act of war on the other. So you have to join in. You have to back up your mates, if you will, right? So if somebody jumps your boy, right, you have to come in. Doesn't matter that your friend picked a fight with somebody who's 3 times bigger than him, right? Because you are friends with them, you jump in and help your friend out. But that's what happens in World War I. And it leads to catastrophic death, right? So these are agreements of mutual defense, and it begins a chain reaction for global war. Let me switch you over now then to, hold on, the American one, because I want to make sure that we're, yeah. We're kind of filling in this. So we can talk about that, right? Roots, colonies, allies, armaments. Germany is going to form an alliance with Austria-Hungary and later Italy and the Ottoman Empire. England is going to form the Triple Entente with France and Russia and kind of America, right? Many Americans already are seeing this as a threat. Okay, hey, you gotta shut the door. Sorry about that. Hold on one second. Okay. So already you have this anti-German feeling pervasive in the United States. You had a lot of German immigrants coming in. There was a lot of socialism. There was a lot of rearmament going on in Germany. And Wilhelm wanted more control. He wanted to be the biggest, baddest king on the block, basically, right? Um, and so he begins a very nationalistic, militaristic regime going on. The assassination triggers a chain of events. Now, here's what happens. It's a combination of assassins being in the right place and the Archduke being very stupid, right? Which he wasn't normally a stupid man, but so they go on parade, and it's a parade for some random holiday um, in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. I don't know, the birthday of the king or something like that. So they're going through the town, and he's in a car with his wife. Everybody's waving, yada yada. Assassins are in the crowd. They throw a bomb. It hits the car behind them. Right? So they take off, and they do manage to escape. And they go off and they kind of regroup at a hospital. But the Archduke wants to check on the people behind it, the people that were affected by this bomb. So stupidly, right, they get back in their car and they go back along the same route where other assassins still are. There's another bomb thrown, doesn't affect it, doesn't hit him, but the chauffeur of the car, the driver of the car, turns down a street to avoid, coming in contact with the rebel in the bombing, and it's a dead-end street. So the assassins just run up and they riddle the car with bullets. And the man is killed alongside his wife. It's brutal, right? But again, not that uncommon during this time period. There's assassinations going on everywhere. This was seen as kind of the modus operandi to upending the policy or the politics of the time. It wasn't very effective, though. Killed this guy and sets off this chain reaction, right, as it says. So what happened? Why? Who does what? And where are we going from there? All right, I know I'm moving back and forth, but this one's better. This is the one I use for world, that's why. July 23rd, the Austro-Hungarians issue an ultimatum to the Serbian peoples to turn over the Black Hand, and particularly this guy that killed the Archduke, right? Seems fair. But the Serbians say no deal. No, we're not doing that. The Serbians view these people as heroes. Next, the Austrians declare war on Serbia. Right? That's 5 days later. The Serbs are not really in any position to fight against the Austrians. But again, the Serbs are much more closely related to Russians than Austrians. Well, Russia says, well, why don't you pick on somebody like your own size, like me? So Russia mobilizes the very next day to defend Serbia, who they kind of feel is their people anyway. Germany says, cool. You do that. We'll declare war on you, and we're going to declare war on your buddy France. Right. Germany declares war on Russia. France mobilizes to defend Russia because they have the alliance with them. August 3rd, Germans declare war on France and invade Belgium. Like, whoa. What did the Belgians do? Nothing. They didn't do anything. They just happened to be in between Germany and France. And it's actually ridiculous. This was a huge blunder for the Germans. They have a border with France already. They don't have to march through a neutral nation such as Belgium to get there. But this was part of their war game, and so they did. But Belgium is neutral, right? So then Belgium calls on its good buddy, Britain, and says, yo, these people just marched through me, and I didn't do nothing to them, and you're my friend. Come help me out. So August 4th, Britain comes to the defense of Belgium and declares war on Germany and Austria-Hungary. So in the span of 2 weeks, all these European nations are at war. Now, how does this become a world war? This looks like a European war to me, right? Every single one of these empires have colonies, territories throughout the world. If you're a colony and mother country goes to war, guess what? You're at war too. So that's how a European conflict, a European assassination, becomes a world problem. We're going to get to that. It becomes a war of attrition. But coming back here, I hate the way this one does that. So, Germany, Austria-Hungary, later Italy, and the Ottomans formed the Triple Alliance. Okay, but that is what Americans call the Central Powers. England, France, Russia are what we call the Allies. And I know it says Triple Entente. That was the name of the alliance. So a good way to remember this is allies are friends. The United States allies with England, France, Russia. The Central Powers are called the Central Powers because they are located in the center of Europe. Okay, so just in case, when you're trying to study this. The United States, President Woodrow Wilson does not want to come into the war. He views this as a largely European problem, a family matter, if you will. He does not want his tenure to be devoted to foreign policy. He really had a lot of domestic policy that he wanted to incorporate. So he says we're going to remain neutral. Can you actually be neutral? Only if you equally trade with both sides. And we don't. Right? There's several reasons for that. Ethnic groups do take sides. You do side with people that sound like you, that look like you, that benefit you economically, which the others were. Right? We speak the same language as the English, and we are pro-allies. They're better at trading. Germany is also a trade partner with us, but we don't trade as much with them. And after the outbreak of war, we tend to blame Germany. Our thoughts on this, as well as the rest of the world, really, is that it's Germany's fault. They should have let Austria-Hungary handle their problem internally. They should not have taken this to another level, right? They also see Germany as very ambitious and with a goal of kind of taking over the rest of Europe. It's a very German thing. We'll see this again, trust me. Right? U.S. England are going to start trading in arms and money. We lend them money. Again, we are the ATMs and Walmarts of Europe at this point, and we tend to focus our trade on the Allies. The United States doesn't have boots on the ground again until 1917. We're not being bombed. We're not in the middle of the carnage. We have the factories and we have the manpower. So we start churning out war munitions, ships, rudimentary airplanes, guns, ammunition, cannons, right? All of the things, clothing, food, money, all of the things for war. And we are making a pretty penny on this. Okay? Germany recognizes this. They are not stupid. And they see how much support the Allies are getting that they are not getting. We are still trading with them, but we're not giving them as much. And recognizes that the United States is not a neutral nation. Now, what causes Congress to agree to go to war? It takes a long time, right? And one of the reasons why World War I is much more understood in Europe and revered, I guess, is because of the amount of carnage and toll it took on them. Every single community lost somebody in World War I. Every single village. People, the men went off in huge numbers to join the war effort, and they were later conscripted. You had, several families, their male lineage completely wiped out in World War I. Thousands of people were dying, And they had been doing this for 2 years, almost 2 years by the time we have the Lusitania. Now, why does America join the war eventually? A couple of things. The first is the Lusitania. Lusitania sinks in 1915. It is a cruise ship operated by the White Star Line, famous for the sinking of the Titanic. It's a large steamship, and it has been carrying people, as a cruise ship does, back and forth on these holidays. But it's also been smuggling munitions. And they call it contraband of war is on the ship. Now, the German government, to their credit, advertised in all the major American newspapers, particularly the ones on the East Coast, do not travel on the Atlantic. Do not cross the Atlantic because there is warfare. German ships will not differentiate. Now, do Americans pay heed to this? Obviously, 128 of them did not. And most are kind of out of touch with how severe the war is in Europe. You know, they get the newspapers and stuff, you get the American press, but back then you didn't have a whole lot of on the front lines coverage, right? War correspondence. So in 1915, Germans torpedo this ship. One torpedo, right? And on a normal cruise liner, that would damage it. It may sink, but you would have plenty of time to get people off. And there was legally, no matter who sunk the ship, if you were nearby, you were obligated to give aid. So oftentimes, if you have the sinking of a ship, say a German torpedoed the ship, they would stop and render aid to the ship that they just torpedoed. Unfortunately, the Lusitania contained contraband. One torpedo and the entire ship blew up. Blew to smithereens. I mean, 0 survivors. So the Germans were right. You can't tell me that that ship didn't have some sort of explosives on board if one torpedo would sink this humongous liner, right? The press, of course, reports on this incident. 128 Americans do lose their lives, but 1,200 people lose their lives total, right? And the press blows this up. You know, how inhumane the Germans were. 128 innocent American lives were taken, and this is an act of war, and we must go to war with Germany to protect our American lives, right? Very emotional, very sensationalized. Okay. Coverage of the sinking of the Lusitania, which sways in the favor of Wilson. Wilson doesn't want to go to war. He campaigned on keeping us out of the war, but he's going to have to. So he needs the court of public opinion. He needs the American people to be on board with this, and the sinking of the Lusitania helps with that. So press runs with that widely. You have a lot of peace advocates in Congress. They don't want to put forth the money, the expense. They don't want to put boots on the ground. They don't want Americans involved in European affairs. William Jennings Bryan is one of those. He said we should not have Americans on belligerent ships. He does a bit of victim blaming, but it is pretty honest, right? The Germans said they were going to bomb ships. You all got on the ships. That's your fault. So he says if you want to stay safe and cross the Atlantic, A, you probably shouldn't, but B, you better be on a ship that isn't involved in the war in Europe. Wilson says that no, a neutral nation and citizens of said neutral nation should be allowed to travel on any ship that they please. That's not exactly binding, but that's his standpoint. Bryan resigns, and there are people that call him a traitor. William Jennings Bryan. He's a major name in politics, has been for the past 30 years, right in the time period we're talking about. And they said no, you got to get out. So Germany halts their unrestricted submarine warfare. They see the blowback they're getting. They see the negative press, the propaganda. So they stopped for a while. Okay, not completely. Tensions are increasing across the board. Nobody is unified in not supporting the war. And in February, Germany comes out and says, that's it, full submarine war, unrestricted submarine warfare. The idea is that they do not want the United States supporting the Allies. Now, and this will be the last thing we talk about today because I know we're short on time. The Zimmerman telegram is really what seals the deal. Zimmerman is the name of a German ambassador in Mexico. And the German government sends him a telegram, but it is intercepted by the Americans. Now, we don't know if Zimmerman ever actually got the telegram, but we know it was never acted upon by the Mexican government. The Zimmerman telegram outlines that the German government wants to enter into an alliance with Mexico, have Mexico start a southern war with the United States, right? The southern border wants the Mexicans to attack the United States so that the United States has to focus on its war in its own hemisphere and not support the war in Europe. If the Mexican government does this, once the Germans finish their war, they will come over and ensure that the Mexicans win their war, and the Mexican government will be given the southwestern portion of the United States back. Right? So this changes everything for Wilson and for Congress. This is a direct attack on the United States. This is the funding of a direct attack or an attempt at incitement of a direct attack in the the Western Hemisphere. Mexico, again, we don't know if he ever actually got the Zimmerman telegram, but wisely said, no deal. We are not interested. Go away. Right? Basically, that they were not going to poke the giant, if you will, especially since the United States had been on a wartime economy for 2 years. Like, we had the goods, right? So that just would have been incredibly stupid for the Mexican government. But this leads to a declaration of war. The United States is done with that beating around the bush. And they're like, fine, if you want to incite war, we'll go to war. And they get a declaration of war, and they declare war on Germany and the Central Powers. What's also going on in Russia at the time, they're going through a revolution. The Tsar abdicates. Eventually, the Bolsheviks take over, but they end the war. They end their part of the war. The Russians pull out, and they sign a peace treaty with the Germans and the Central Powers. So they have closed down the Eastern Front of the war. The latter half of World War I is all fought on the Western Front, or at least the last 2 years, because Russia's out. So by losing that key ally, Great Britain and France need the United States. And the United States, after the Zimmerman telegram, is more than willing to help them out. Okay, we'll stop there today. What questions do you have for me? And make sure that your name is in the chat, please. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.